Sarah and David finally closed on the old Victorian house on Elm Street. It was everything they wanted, spacious, full of character, and just within their budget. The real estate agent had been oddly eager, rushing the paperwork. As they carried their first box over the threshold, Sarah felt a chill, dismissing it as a draft. The house was silent, a deep, absorbing silence she wasn't used to after years of city life. In the basement, behind a heavy reinforced door, they found a perfectly constructed soundproof room. A musician's studio, perhaps? David mused. Sarah just nodded, a strange sense of unease settling in her stomach. A week in, the silence began to feel heavy, oppressive. At night, Sarah would lie awake, straining to hear the normal creaks and groans of an old house, but there were none. It was as if the house was holding its breath. One night, unable to sleep, she went down to the kitchen. As she passed the basement door, she heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching. It wasn't coming from within the basement. It was the sound of something lightly dragging its nails across the inside of the soundproof room's door. Her blood ran cold. She woke David, but by the time he arrived, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the sound had stopped. "It's just the house settling, honey," he said. But he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Driven by a morbid curiosity, Sarah decided to investigate the soundproof room in the daylight. She brought her phone, using its camera to record. The room was empty, save for a single, large antique mirror leaning against the far wall. Its surface was dusty and murky. She walked in, her footsteps deadened by the thick walls. As she faced the mirror, her reflection was blurred. She stepped closer, wiping the dust from the glass. Her reflection stared back, but it was wrong. It didn't move when she moved. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and it was smiling a wide, vacant smile that Sarah knew she wasn't making. She stumbled back, her scream trapped by the soundproofing, as the reflection in the mirror slowly lifted a hand and waved. The entity in the mirror began to learn. At first, it was small things. Sarah would drop a glass in the kitchen, and a moment later, from the basement, she'd hear the faint, muffled tink of shattering glass. She would cry, and a soft, distorted weeping would echo up through the floorboards. David heard nothing, blaming her stress on the move. One evening, they had a fight. David shouted, "You're being paranoid, Sarah." The moment the words left his mouth, a deafening guttural roar of "paranoid" erupted from the basement, shaking the very foundations of the house. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the sound itself. David's face was white with fear. It was learning their voices. Sarah, desperate for answers, found a hidden compartment in an old desk. Inside were the previous owner's journals. The last entry was scrawled in a panicked hand. "It doesn't just mimic sound, it consumes it." The silence in the house is its presence, growing. It's learning to shape itself from the sounds it steals. It's almost complete. It wants a voice of its own. It wants to come out. It mimics until it no longer needs to. As she read the final word, the heavy deadbolt on the basement door slid open with a loud, definitive clunk. The invitation had been given. Sarah and David stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring into the abyss. The silence was a physical weight. Then, a sound. It was the sound of Sarah's own voice, but flat and emotionless, calling from below. "David, come down. I'm scared." Then David's voice, a perfect mimic. "Sarah." It's okay. I'm here. The voices began to overlap, a cacophony of their own conversations, their laughs, their arguments, all played back from the void. The door at the bottom of the stairs creaked open. Standing there in the dim light was a figure. It was a crude, shifting silhouette of a person, made of shadow and static, and it was using their stolen voices to call them into the silence forever. The police found the house empty. No signs of a struggle. David's car was in the driveway. Sarah's phone on the kitchen counter. The only thing out of place was the door to the soundproof room in the basement. It was locked from the inside. When they finally broke it down, the room was pristine and empty, save for the large antique mirror. One officer glanced into it and saw his own reflection. He shivered, thinking for a moment that his reflection had smiled a fraction of a second after he did. He shook his head, blaming the poor lighting. As the investigators left, the house settled back into its perfect, consuming silence. It was waiting. It had new voices to learn, and it was so very patient.